Good day, gentle readers. It's December 6th, 2024. So today, from a desk with Ross Finlayson here in Seattle, Washington, is another installment of Logos 2000, 21st Century Metaphysics and Foundations. A foundations with a metaphysics. It's a theory all in itself. So the idea today is that there's not much to it. And in fact, there's an idea that there's nothing or anything all about it, but that there's not necessarily so much to it to arrive at least a starter foundations that's at least on the surface, if incomplete, consistent, constant, and very, very well concrete, as with regards to such matters here as of the classical logic with the classical expositions of the superclassical, and that kind of including dual monism, and then also for the Aristotelian, that the Aristotelian includes Aristotle's deductive ability, or Aristotle won't be fooled, is the idea, as with regards to the fuller account of classical logic than today's often partial or half account. And so that's said to be given as a great strength, and though it does entail to begin to require abstraction and comprehensive thinking, being critical and conscientious, these kinds of things, and then it can be explained that it's in the thinker's usual self-interest and good to follow Aristotle's course of not only being able to make a point and to understand when somebody else has made a point, but to given a sufficient information, not be fooled, or to maintain a personal modality, a temporality, a unique state that there is kind of a unique state. So let's take a look at some books today, what I've got piled here in the stack. What I should so hope to do is take a look here what Ernest Cassirer has been writing about some 100 odd years ago, or 80 odd years ago. So I have here, this is called an essay on man. And it says, from the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science, it said, this is a book to regale not only the scholar, but the general reader with an interest in the more fundamental problems of culture. So that's not necessarily part of our technical philosophy, but is part of psychology, and it's also part of sociology. And so then also it's part of the philosophy as regards to that. And that many things that go into, the matters of reason and rationality, of course, are define all these things. So it says here that in Journal of Philosophy, in reading of it, says, not only a master of exposition, but a man of Catholic interest, that means universal, and many-sided erudition, the student of Cassirer's philosophy, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, must from now on turn to the essay on man as the best balanced and most mature expression of his thought. So Ernst Cassirer, one of the 20th century's greatest philosophers, presents the results of his lifetime study of man's cultural achievements. So here's kind of like when you study history, and it's like, well, is there cyclical history, which everybody always gets told not to not know because it'll be doomed to repeat? Or is there progressive history, and that we're actually evolving and not like devolving or just revolving? And so that's one of the things with regards to, then culture. Culture is varied and widely, because culture can be of a source of high culture and low culture. And then with regards to what the culture values can range from all kinds of things, from like a cargo cult and the cultish to, acculturation, which is above socialization at all, and getting along in the herd, to like what's good for the herd and this kind of stuff. In an abstract sense, the aesthetic sense. And then, of course, after, usually in the sense of right and wrong, that are, again, not so much relevant here except for in mathematics, where there is right and wrong. And then it's considered the virtue and aestheticism itself of that. Doctrines, he discusses such subjects as the origins of language, doctrines of aesthetics, Fraser's theory of magic. See, I think that's kind of ridiculous. The play theory of art, here we talk about like Suzanne Langer's theory of art, Holmes' theory of art. It's that it's expression and expression and expression again. It's related to poesy, kind of like when there was discussion the other day of art, from reading about like art through the ages. One thing that I didn't mention, and I should have, is performance art. So performance art, before kind of any of the other kinds of arts, is that dance or rhetoric is an art. That all these kinds of things are as of the arts, is with regards to the performance art vis-a-vis the crafts and the arts of the trades and the arts in the media and design and architecture and allied arts, say. So then with regards to theories of what art is and trying to make a theory to it, I mean, you can ask the economists, and it's like, well, okay, Samuelson, I noticed you make a function where it's like everything in the world has a value. And so then it's all part of one utility function that's utility, the whole thing. And what about that? And he's like, well, there's aesthetic value also. And so some theories of art are kind of related in an economic sense, which for some transactional types is like, that's the only way I can count my fingers, is count my pennies this way. And then with regards to then, well, what is art and what is good art? And it's like vis-a-vis things like the mandala or sand painting is like, what is that? It's like a beautiful picture made of sand. And then to cap it all off, the wind carries it away, like scratching figures on the beach or something like that. The waves take it away. And so that's what makes it of everlasting value, is its vanishing. Its creation and its vanishing. With regards to something else, it's like, the statue of David or something like that, or the Vitruvian Man, or these kinds of things with regards to like, that is an image forever. And with regards to modern art also, and things like like Christo or something like that. This is a guy, he took giant panels of like plastic or something like that, and he'd go out into like the ocean, and he'd find this chain of islands, and he'd like wrap all the islands in this thing. So this was like one of the largest installations that there was, and it's not done anymore. They got enough plastic in the oceans. And then there's something like sometimes there's even like the scatological, like a man put a crucifix in a box of urine or something like that. And it's like, is that art? It's like, that is obscene. It's heretical. It's shocking. But oh yeah, it's art. It's art. And so then there's whether art is expressions of like sex and death. Again, this is there's the usual saying when you start learning about art and art appreciation that everybody knows is, I don't know what art is, but I know what I like. And so that's just something that is most people's usual appreciation of art and the artistic touches. And then, as mentioned, there's much made for the Spartan and like the Shaker design. Form follows function, vis-a-vis the wonderful geometric interpretation of the Byzantine and mosques, which don't have any realism at all involved, but and in fact are meant to not convey impressions of personages, to make it so that in the geometry and for example about phi and the golden ratio and that conch shell back there on the table and these kinds of things, that it's a real sort of that's something that is always of the inspirational sort as well. And then that realism is a lot of people's usual idea that it's somehow different than realism, that art is not just any old video feed, and so this here is a realist account in a world so copyright 1944 by Yale University Press. Cassirer's essay on man begins with this preface. First impulse for writing this book came from my English and American friends who repeatedly and urgently asked me to publish an English translation of my philosophy of symbolic forms. So we read a lot of about the symbols from this book called the J.E. Cirlot's, Cirlot, Cirlot's Dictionary of Symbols. Because many symbols cross cultures and many symbols are cross-cultural. And so with regards to the logos, meaning symbol, that symbols and then their representations and expressions are these kinds of things that they are. They are these kinds of things. A book concerned with psychological, ontological, epistemological questions and containing chapters on myth and religion, language and art, and science and history is open to the objection that it is a mixtum compositum of the most disparate and heterogeneous things. I hope that the reader, after having read these pages, will find this objection to be unfounded. It was one of my principal aims to convince him that all the subjects dealt with in this book are, after all, only one subject. There are different roads leading to a common center, and to my mind, it is for a philosophy of culture to find out and determine this center. I don't know if that's possible in the endeavor, but I'd relate it to this, like, about the intersubjectivity and interobjectivity, that at least the technical side here is deemed to be so. But culture and acculturation is of the widely diverse cultures of the world and the world cultures of the world, and especially those like the sand painting mandala that are just like a one day thing, you know, and so that in itself is an own part of culture. And he talks about the crisis about knowledge in himself, and so that's like when we're reading from about Schelling just briefly a bit ago, and it's like, well, is there knowledge and wisdom, or wisdom and knowledge, and do we not have it? And it's like, is existentialism and nihilism? It's like, well, I understand that you can't really just say it arrives, but if you're saying it doesn't arrive and then unhappy because there's nothing to arrive, then isn't that something that's arrived? Like the need for this, there's ontological needs, kind of a sense, which start with reason and then go for truth. This is the thing. Aristotle declares that all human knowledge originates from a basic tendency of human nature manifesting itself in man's most elementary actions and reactions. The whole extent of the life of the senses is determined by and impregnated with this tendency. He quotes Aristotle as saying, "All men by nature desire to know. An indication of this is the delight we take in our senses, for even apart from their usefulness, their love for themselves, and above all others, the sense of sight. For not only with a view to action, but even when we are not going to anything, we prefer seeing to everything else. The reason is that this, most of all senses, makes us know and brings to light many differences between things." See, here, for example, it's not necessarily assumed that all thinking beings or all feeling beings have sight. They have some sense. The idea is that there's this internal mental faculty called the object sense, time sense, sense of the continuum, word sense, and a number sense. An object sense, thoroughly. That then, with regards to, for example, this being all spoken word, is that essentially as there's nothing here truly dependent on merely some apsara or hand gesture or something like that to arrive at like this, what we might say spoken word account, is just an example, though, that in the intersubjectivity and interobjectivity, what arrives is a text, and it may be just some symbols, but it is the textual that is considered what is the object sense, and that it's constant relayed via all channels of sense. Is often referred to as the abstract and then the symbolic, representing a positivist account when that becomes written and it is legible. It's just kind of like we're talking about the reading and something's legible, and then religion is something's bindable. It can be bound to, then it has something bound to it. These are usual types of considerations. This passage is highly characteristic, Cassirer continues, of Aristotle's conception of knowledge as distinguished from Plato's. Such a philosophical eulogy of man's sensuous life would be impossible in the work of Plato. He could never compare the desire for knowledge with the delight we take in our senses. In Plato, the life of the senses is separated from the life of the intellect by a broad and insurmountable gulf. Knowledge and truth belong to a transcendental order, to the realm of pure and eternal ideas. So, reflecting on the Epicurean and Aristotle's great account that can speak to people, thinking beings and feeling beings with their senses, by their senses, phenomenologically, has that then the noumenologically has that, of course, since antiquity, and for all the idealistic accounts, it's Plato everybody points to as saying that there's this truth. And then it's as well that in the greatest dogmas of organized religions, that great figures like Augustine also arrived at were Platonists in this sense. And so that's pretty much given as also a worldwide universal in that sense. With regards to traditions that begin with an account of having to discard such notions to open the mind or the freedom mind or something like that, then they also will generally as well arrive at, in the contemplation of things, is like, that's what your mind freed, that's what your mind opened. So in this way, it is our mind that moves, as the koan goes. Aristotle, he attempts to explain the ideal world, the world of knowledge, in terms of life. In both realms, according to Aristotle, we find the same unbroken continuity. See, Aristotle is a Platonist too. Yet we have our logicist positivism, because it's not enough to say, well, you understand, because that doesn't really affect to relay something that's someone else can fully relay to somebody else. There's that in these discussions, when to say something is understood is pretty much pushed away as like it's not misunderstood later. It's only a prior and posterior account of things, compared to knowledge, wisdom, science, and intelligence, which are kind of arrived at things that would be matters of common knowledge, common wisdom, common fact, and all these kinds of things. It is as well, though, that to be built in this where it's like it's kind of de facto and it's kind of understood to be understood, related reasonings, and that there is kind of a sense to things, is of course a very common intuition shared by all, and that it comes and goes, and it's not always common, and it's not always shared by all, but yet that's how it goes. So that's just to be said that people, thinking beings or feeling beings, when I say men here, man, I just mean a thinking being and a feeling being, or people in an egalitarian appellation, develop mostly in this way, and everybody about the same way. Divergence is just another form of freedom. In nature, as well as in human knowledge, the higher forms, sense, perception, memory, experience, imagination, and reason, are all linked together by a common bond. So here I read a lot from Cassirer, and I agree with this. And he talks about stages of development. He talks about anthropology. In the histories of all the religions of the world, in Judaism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Christianity, we can observe the individual steps of this development. And he leaves out the greater mosaical. He leaves out many different worlds, but he's kind of got a certain particular worldview here. In all the higher forms of religious life, the maxim, know thyself, is regarded as a categorical imperative, a must-do, as an ultimate moral and religious law. Not all religions, because some it's like give yourself, and so that's but it is given to it's always given to not deny truth, for the truths of the things. Heraclitus, to characterize the whole of his philosophy by the two words, I have sought for myself. I have sought for myself. I have sought for myself. But this new tendency of thought, although in a sense inherent, did not come to its full maturity till the time of Socrates, the landmark separating Socratic from pre-Socratic thought. Socrates never attacks or criticizes the theories of his predecessors. He does not intend to introduce a new philosophical doctrine. I don't give much to Socrates at all. Then he says, only one question remains. What is man? Socrates always maintains and defends the idea of an objective, absolute, universal truth. But the only universe he knows, to which all his inquiries refer, is the universe of man. His philosophy, if it possesses a philosophy, is strictly anthropological. So that is here too, because man isn't of the sorts of thinking beings and feeling beings, so that's all the same kind of thing, which is fine. But then also with regards to the world, then he quotes Marcus Aurelius: "Distract not thyself, be not too eager, but be thine own master, and look upon life as a man, as a human being, as a citizen, as a mortal creature. Things do not touch the soul, for they are external and remain immovable, but our disturbances come only of that judgment that we form on ourselves. All these things which thou seest change immediately, it will no longer be. And constantly bear in mind how many of these changes thou hast already witnessed. The universe, mutation, life, affirmation." So that was from Marcus Aurelius. This character of the problem has found its clearest expression in the work of Augustine. Augustine stands at the frontier of two ages. Living in the 4th century of the Christian era, he's grown up in the tradition of Greek philosophy, and is especially the system of Neoplatonism, which has left its mark on his whole philosophy. But on the other hand, he's the pioneer of medieval thought. He's the founder of medieval philosophy and of Christian dogmatics. In his Confessions, we can follow every step of his way, from Greek philosophy to Christian revelation. According to Augustine, all philosophy prior to the appearance of Christ was liable to one fundamental error, and was affected with one and the same heresy. The power of reason was extolled as the highest power of man. And that's the power of reason is a very, very high power, at least. But what man could never know until he was enlightened with the special divine revelation is that reason itself is one of the most questionable and ambiguous things in the world. No, I don't know about that. I don't think that's really the reading that I would make of Augustine, or of as with accounts to Epiphany, or otherwise the disclosure, the dialetheia, which to be revealed, the revelation would as well be with regards to separating that from kind of like uppercase revelation and the whole idea of the mystical experience in the very dogmatic tradition of various aspects of the Catholic churches, say, that here I'm not following Cassirer so much anymore. But it's very usual, this reading of this lens, and it's also very classical, the account. Reason for Augustine does not have a simple and unique, but rather a double and divided nature. So here it has dual monism. And then it talks about deism and the image. And he talks about Adam. Some stories say that Atlantis is for whom Adam is named. Atlantis. But he reflects archetypal primordial man in all the usual accounts. It cannot reconstruct itself. It cannot, by its own efforts, return to its former pure essence. Such is the new anthropology, as understood by Augustine, and maintained in all the great systems of medieval thought. Even Thomas Aquinas, the disciple of Aristotle, who goes back to the sources of Greek philosophy, does not venture to deviate from the fundamental dogma. He concedes the human reason a much higher power than Augustine did, but he is convinced that reason cannot make the right use of those powers unless there's a higher authority. Here we have come to a complete reversal of all the values upheld by Greek philosophy, and then here it's like that's voluntary, and in fact it's a matter of maybe voluntary, and then actually being able to find it, which not all do. Yet this is kind of Stoic. The Stoic precept that man has to obey and revere his inner principle, the demon within himself, is now regarded as dangerous idolatry. That's kind of so, because the world is a wonderful place. And then as regards to eudaemonia, daemonia and eudaemonia, is that eudaemonia is okay. But, these are better angels, let's say, of the usual accounts of dualism in concept, that the very act of reasoning is like, well, I'm going to consider both alternatives and then decide. We don't want to make a compromise but usually it's all matters of compromise. But the idea is that logically and purely logically there's decision, and it's based upon all the things that go into it. So Cassirer affects to reflect a very good account up to the doctors of the church there put, and not just for their dogma and doctrine with regards to beliefs within the church, its religion. Also the fact that they're entirely related also with the account of reason, and it's very strong, and the highest power, and it's like a dual monism. It would also be omniscient. So we that's super scientific to man, yet as well it's an ideal, if it's not an absolute. Mentions Pascal, a moral philosophy in terms of a system of geometry, an ethica morae geometrico demonstrata, is to the mind of Pascal an absurdity, a philosophical dream. Here it's subjective. Hence, mathematics can never become the instrument of a true doctrine of man. It can be of a man, not necessarily all of humanity. It is ridiculous to speak of man as if he were a geometrical proposition. No, it's not. In the mathematical universe hypothesis, it's like the numbers are the things, and then these plastic and metal and concrete numbers are us. But it's not the matrix with all the zeros and ones, though. It's like continuous yet, but it is mathematical in a sense. And so that being abstractly kind of like so, it yet goes to show that finite partial half accounts cannot explain a person, really. Although many models accurately kind of aren't falsified, or their hypotheses aren't invalidated, as we say, because we're conscientious probabilists and statisticians, that there's a long tail, and the error record and these kinds of things help make for statistics that statistics is never right, in a sense. It's just possibly not wrong. So then he says the first and supreme law is the law of contradiction. So this is the principle of excluded middle, and here that's like not exactly Ernst, because our constructivist accounts can only carry forward things, and then with regards to the law of contradiction and tertium non datur, it's like it's not a yes or no question what you got there with regards to the interrogative accounts and and tertium non datur, the principle of excluded middle, law of excluded middle, principle of contradiction. That's not primary necessarily, no. There's inverse kind of first. Like the inverse of that is like, well, what's the opposite of the principle of contradiction? It's like, well, the first axiom is the inverse. What's the first axiom or principle? Well, it's what is it not? You know, vis-a-vis I am not wrong. I am not wrong. I am not wrong. Inductively, I'm not wrong. You know, or versus inductively I'm right, which then again is like, well, that's not really how it's arrived at. I mean, you have to have somewhere to go to, and some kind of absolute ideal that this partial account, this inductive inference that we're going to arrive at. Because otherwise we have examples that are counterexamples to inductive inference that make for a constant, and it ends up wrong, just to, you know, make it so. Not in closed categories, not in things that are entirely defined and determined, and with regards to the closed categories and the finite, those are all perfectly well defined, and induction can go all the way around. It's just in this infinite, superclassical, and continuous that Cassirer's theory here, and the way it's carried down this half of the Aristotelian tradition, is missing out. And so here the first inverse is not a principle of contradiction, it's first axiom is inverse, not contradiction. Traditional logic and metaphysics are themselves in no better position to understand and solve the riddle of man. Why bother? You know, it's a good thing. Solve most other things, though. The first and supreme law is the law of contradiction, as we just described here. That's his axiom. That now it can be read as that if it ever comes up anything different, then you say, well, what happened to first principles and final causes? You know. Not that I'm not getting a lot from Cassirer and enjoying this and agreeing mostly, but these are points that are held up like as that's like you'd find at least half of the university departments to be like, well, Ernst Cassirer told me that this is so, and Aristotle seems to agree. I'm like, well, yeah, but Aristotle also wrote up one where it's not so, and circular movement is eternal and this kind of stuff. So that's something to get figured out. It very much then makes strongly enforced ever after the halfway account, and its strength by belying its weakness, in a sense. Contradiction is the very element of human existence, he says. I don't think so. And he says there's religion. There's only one secret of human nature, that of religion. And so religion, as we discuss the word and the language of it, and that, for example, the word in Christianity is to mean like, well, in the book of John, it starts that there was nothing, and then there was Jesus, the word, and it means like the gift of an expression, the gift of an element, a symbol, a logos, the same word. And so that's often the most usual idea that comes to mind, because you have in Genesis 1, it's like there was nothing, and there was space and light and in time, and then it's like John 1, it's like it's kind of like in the middle, it's like it begins again. So this is algebra, this is language, this is etymology, this is all these things that come in for these dual accounts that for mathematics and logic, it's like, well, here's geometry and here's algebra and words. This one's finite and this, or rather, this one's finite and discrete, and this one's continuous and infinite. And so how they work together is they attain to each other, and they break down from each other, and they come back and forth across these inductive impasses by the bridges, the analytical bridges, the meeting in the middle of nowhere, and the completions, these ways. That here then, when we talk about religion, it's the word of the religion is what we bind ourselves to. That the religion is that which you give your ontological commitment to, And so for many people, they'll describe that as like, well, that is what man is about. It's what they think. And so in this sense, besides organizations of ideologies and considering organized religions, for example, as very strong ideologies or very various ideologies, it's what Cassirer here can be read as generously as saying is like, man is what he thinks, which is not disagreeable, and much reflects also then, man is what he does, and that he's a thinking being, so that's what he thinks. Maybe he's not conscious. Then we get into what is consciousness and these kinds of things. Then he quotes up Socrates, Epictetus, or Marcus Aurelius. And these are people who would speak to people who want to think that they're thinking what they speak to and have enough. And then he says a phrase very much reminiscent of Schopenhauer's qualitas occultus. He says the deus absconditus, a hidden deity. And then he says that man is also homo abscondicus, like that it's not. We're not in ourselves, and so I would disagree with that, because everybody's present. So I kind of see, you can really tell that this is very much like Schopenhauer. It's very much kind of like the analytic tradition divorced from a metaphysics. And now we were just talking about Montaigne. He says, in his criticism of human reason, Montaigne uses all the well-known traditional arguments of the systems of Greek skepticism. But he adds a new weapon, which in his hands proves to be of the greatest strength and of paramount importance. Nothing is more apt to humiliate us and to break the pride of human reason than an unprejudiced view of the physical universe. Let man, he says, in a famous passage of his Apology de Raymond Sebon, and so then this is some reading from Montaigne that Cassirer has already translated, which is nice. Make me understand by the force of his reason upon what foundations he has built those great advantages he think he has over other creatures. Who has made him believe that this admirable motion of the celestial arch, the eternal light of those luminaries that roll so high over his head, the wondrous and fearful motions of that infinite ocean, should be established and continue so many ages for his service and convenience? The world does revolve around Montaigne, or you, or me. The world revolves around anybody, in a sense. That is one of the great things about the objective view of a thinking being, is that there's an aspect of truth in that. It's not true that there's not other objective beings, but it's a stage also in the conception of what could be. So, and then as regards to how can we be so proud and not humble to think in the macro scale that we are anything but the micro scale? And it's like, that's kind of the idea. Can anything be imagined so ridiculous that this miserable and wretched creature, who is not so much as master of himself, but subject to the injuries of all things, should call himself master and emperor of the world, of which he has not power to know the least part, much less to command the whole? Well, there are goals and goals, I suppose. And then Cassirer says, man is always inclined to regard the small circle in which he lives as the center of the world, and to make his particular private life the standard of the universe. He's speaking to I don't agree with that. He might be talking about an abstract, he's defining an abstract cohort of a body of the population of all the peoples, the pupils, that does not reflect that everybody's wondered, what everybody's wondered before, what is it, and these kinds of things. Everybody has a philosophy. Everybody has a psychology, and psychology doesn't work on everybody. So, the practical or applied psychology, say. So we've been reading Cassirer here for a while, and we've got into some of the ideas of why logical positivism and existentialism and nihilism are given as things, because it's kind of like reading off these accounts, and then also why it's not necessary to follow that either. Because, and by a principle of sufficient reason and these kinds of things, it's okay. And it's okay. So Cassirer is opening his work with a crisis, and it's kind of like Heidegger does. He's like, here's something wrong. Maybe this will speak to you. But then, how can that answer, without making a new one or coming off of something different, is something here that it's the idea is that that's already figured out somehow, and then we just have the human condition with its ups and downs. Montaigne's words give us the clue to the whole subsequent development of the modern theory of man. How about a postmodern theory of man that's not disfigurist and yet is structuralist? Checks all the boxes. Giordano Bruno was the first thinker to enter upon this path, which in a sense became the path of all modern metaphysics. What is characteristic of the philosophy of Giordano Bruno is that here the term infinity changes its meaning. So it's another account of superclassical knowledge. In Greek classical thought, infinity is a negative concept. Well, not all of it, no. The infinite is the boundless or indeterminate. It has no limit and no form, and it is therefore inaccessible to human reason. Here it's not considered so, which lives in the realm of form and can understand nothing but forms. In this sense, the finite and infinite, Pyrrhon and Aporon, are declared by Plato and the Philebus to be the two fundamental principles which are necessarily opposed to each other. There's the inverses. They're complementary. They complete each other. They're complementary duals. There's of two. There's this one thing that's of two. So it's just not so unusual. In Bruno's doctrine, infinity no longer means a mere negation or limitation. On the contrary, it means the immeasurable and inexhaustible abundance of reality and the unrestricted power of the human intellect. So Giordano Bruno, and as was mentioned, among his various things that were considered heresies to the church at the time, which is why he was burned at the stake, which was as a punishment because those are considered crimes, were basically that he argued against one of the doctrinal teachings of the church that was about Mary or something like that, and then the other one might have been about like other worlds, like, well, there's other worlds, and but it wasn't about infinity, and it wasn't necessarily about some of these other ideas that Bruno had a wide variety of ideas. So that said, though, infinity is in, yes, infinity is in, and then we can point to Duns Scotus and other similar figures who already had it there. So, but there's more to learn about Giordano Bruno and what then goes into this modern account, and that there's more than one modern account of these things. This doctrine was the first and decisive step toward man's self-liberation, toward becoming, towards being, and these kinds of things. But it's only to be attained to. It can't be achieved by any means. It's just it can always grow. It's unexhaustible. It's limitless. ... It's unbounded. It's inexhaustible. It's limitless. ... Yet then that's quite a different thing than imaginary, fantastical, megalomania, often it's called, when the beyond ambitious and beyond grandiose is kind of like megalomania that is considered insanity, in a sense. Man no longer lives in the world of a finite physical universe. He can traverse the air and break through all the imaginary boundaries of the celestial spheres which have been erected by a false metaphysics and cosmology. The infinite universe sets no limits to human reason. On the contrary, it is the great incentive of human reason. The human intellect becomes aware of its own infinity through measuring its powers by the infinite universe. All of this is expressed in the work of Bruno in a poetical, not in a scientific language. The new world of modern science, the mathematical theory of nature, was still unknown to Bruno. Giordano Bruno. He could not, therefore, pursue his way to its logical conclusion. It took the combined efforts of all the metaphysicians and scientists of the 17th century to overcome the intellectual crisis brought about by the discovery of the Copernican system. So after like the Ptolemaic Revolution, there's the Copernican Revolution, and that was discussed quite a bit here in Moment and Motion, and about Galileo and the time of Galileo and and the Counter-Reformation after the Inquisitions and stuff like that. In these times when it's so arrived, then there's actually bringing in the scientific discourse. That's when actually scientific discourse entered the lexicon, while at the same time it was like given to various parties, so that in the same sense, from my perspective, it just seemed like, well, then the church is still totally conservative and nothing changed at all. There are no changes at all, but it's different and it's scientific. Carry on and these kinds of things. So that's kind of the way it is. Every great thinker, Galileo, Descartes, Leibniz, Spinoza, had a special share in the solution of this problem. We've got some discussion of these thinkers, and so the thoughts that are associated with them, and so how we can refer to these developments and the thoughts and the thinking of them and uses and the mentions of the things by mentioning these schools of these men, that it's considered that we're even past that, and so that's the nice thing. And he describes how Descartes begins with doubt. Even here, the idea of the infinite turns out to be the only instrument for the overthrow of universal doubt. Yeah, because otherwise there's an argument that is not so. And then that gets into the ontological argument for the existence of a supreme, which is left here as after the super scientific in a sense. Because if the ontological is scientific, it's whatever super scientific is just super scientific it. So it's just considered that there is a silver thread of metaphysics, and with it, time and a continuity, and in the mathematical universal hypothesis, the entirety of it is a thing. As with regards to freedom of religion, which is a question and a crisis in itself, an opening, a perestroika. These are usual types of things. In the contemplations and deliberations of philosophy, that's a lot of what philosophy is about, is thinking, and in the inversions, the invert of thinking. So yeah, then as with regards to that going on, he says that that's kind of how the 17th century arrived. And after that kind of, it was the Copernican revolution, as he gives it. Then he says, in 1754, Denis Diderot published a series of aphorisms entitled Pensées sur l'interprétation de la nature, Thoughts of the Interpretation of Nature. In this essay, he declared that the superiority of mathematics in the realm of science is no longer uncontested. Mathematics, he asserted, has reached such a high degree of perfection that no further progress is possible. Henceforth, mathematics will remain stationary. Well, there's kind of like Gödel and his completeness and incompleteness. As after Gödel's like, I whipped up a quick proof that arithmetic is complete. Well, here's another one that it's not. And so then that will, until something like that gets all figured out, that no, mathematics or science of it is not stationary either, and all the details that could possibly be is not stationary either, but then also there's much more since then. So here's this other great book about Cassirer, because this is all about the philosophy of scientific reasoning for the theory of relativity, construction and convention. This conclusion is actually drawn when the concepts of the inertial system, the inertial time scale, are described as mere conventions. Those are actually part of the ideals. Poincaré in an investigation of the conditions of time measurement, has deduced the general consequences very decisively. Yeah, there's much to be read from Poincaré, and I'll be looking for some authoritative sources that help to expound on Poincaré. The concept of energy. This is basically like substance, essence, forms. Have you heard of that? How about energy? Well, yeah, it's kind of the same as energia and ontology. In fact, it is also the same. That's the usual today. So, the atom and matter, duals. In this doctrine, a determination of purely philosophical reflection is admitted into the foundations of scientific thought. And he says, but the function of reflection is thereby limited and exhausted. It's like, well, we attain to that. Because the function of reflection is that there is one that implements the thing. And then the one we have, each piece is its own piece of that. Energy and concept of number. The heno-theory was addressed here. One theory, many theories, all one theory. Qualities of Aristotle. Science and Locke. From an essay on human understanding. So one imagines, Cassirer's essay on man and reflects a bunch on Locke's essay on human understanding. And then addressing many ideas, and then the psychology of the area of a space. That gets into perception. And then he gets into some of the algebraic accounts of the formulaic accounts, which Democritus brought into the foundations of atomism, which in modern times was taken up by Galileo to support the fundamental distinction between primary and secondary quantities. That's the whole mechanical view of the world. No, there can be a thoroughly mechanical view of the world. We must go back to the transformation of the physical concept of truth involved in it, by which it comes into direct contact with the fundamental problem of logic. I'm not sure what the fundamental problem of logic is. We have Newton says hypotheses non fingo, and it's like, well, Newton, you don't want to have a theory? He's like, I got it reduced to this, and rather not have you tearing it apart. It's like, well, okay, Newton, but hypotheses non fingo. All right, so there's much to be read from Cassirer on his consideration of the development of psychology and philosophy, and as regards to individuals and bodies of individuals, and then also with regards to theory of science and this kind of thing. Geometry is a mathematics. Some people have mathematics as science, and other people like Plato have it's like, well, it's just mathematics. It's perfect. So Graustein has something, I don't really have too much time to read so much of this. Metric geometry of the complex plane. No, looking for something about inverses, or he's got a projective generalization of a metric theorem. That might be what to look at here, briefly. If Q1, Q2, Q3 are the points at infinity on the sides of the triangle, see, he's got space inversion. As long ago we read from Wertheimer and stuff like this, when he was discussing Galileo and Einstein and reading these things, with regards to his phi phenomenon and these kinds of things, that after this theory on the harmonic division, page 62's a projective generalization of a metric theorem. The reader is familiar with the theorem to the effect that the medians of a triangle are concurrent. We propose to generalize this theorem, that is, to obtain a more general theorem of which it is but a special case. So this has some things to do with like things standing vis-a-vis things all coming together, and also with regards to Pappus's various theorems. Pappus's theorems about the 3 lines and the 3 points, or the 9 points and 9 lines theorems, about the 9-point theorem, which is like a triangle, some circles in it, and these kinds of things. That here this is as regards to harmonic division, and so what it implements and describes is a geometric account of something that then would relate to these harmonics and then overtones, which is a real interest here. That's something that I'm going to try and figure out some more later. So I'll be looking at that a little bit. This is Derrida and Husserl and the geometry. We've been reading that for a little bit. We've been kind of following up with nuclear theory at the end here. Oh, here's some biology. This is called the Gray's Anatomy coloring book. And I got this book a long, long time ago. I saw this and I was like, I thoroughly have to have this. And what it has is got all kinds of anatomical diagrams. So the atomos is like the uncuttable. And then anatomy is after the idea of a study of human physiological anatomy is like as of an inner view, which is regards to there's nothing that can be seen inside. It's not accessible to the senses, not in a way that's not intrusive or destructive to otherwise the operation or what it is for itself. These days, like when we were talking about the medical imaging and moment in motion, there was stuff like, well, there's the ways these days that rays can make waves and then arrive at a picture of what's unknown otherwise by the senses. So it talks about stuff. Here's the endocrine system, it says. The hypophysis and hypothalamus. So the endocrine system has got involved all kinds of the control messages of the body. They're called hormones. And in regards to like control systems like the peripheral and central nervous system, they got electrical signals largely, but then you're driven at all these different axon dendrite junctions by all these relay messaging ions is usually enough idea. And then with regards to hormones or proteins, and so they also indicate many kinds of what's called factors, and the factors of the RNA and the DNA to make proteins. So the proteome is the whole body of all the proteins in the system. The genome is all the code, and the genes, the chromosomes, and the whole central dogma of molecular biology is that there's a cell and then it's got everything in it, and that everything arrives from that. So that's the whole central dogma of molecular biology. Now this has changed, like 20 or 30 years ago. It's like, well, there's environmental factors. So everything from like north and south, or the differentiation of the multipotent, pluripotent, and totipotent stem cells, the mesenchymal and stem cells that are undifferentiated, that they differentiate the cells of all these various organ systems and things of the human physiology. This was it's a usual course of about a year or two, and it introduces, after some knowledge of chemistry, to understand the systems of what are called. I'll have to remember some more later, but it's the mechanisms by which biological processes take place, like ATP and this kind of stuff, or mitosis and cellular division and cellular reproduction. And so this is usually has a very usual term that I've misplaced in my memory. That then all these different systems is how the body is described. And it's built with this fundamental dogma of the molecular biology. It's like, well, it all just kind of arrives on the thing. But then already the environmental factors has been put into the central dogma of molecular biology. There was an article just last week or so, and it's like, the central dogma of molecular biology is different. It's like, oh, how's that? And it's like, well, they added that there's controls in it. It's like, we just call those factors already. That was already in it, and it's underneath that, and it's all part of that. So it's not really so relevant what gets expressed in these matters of the active living, the this thing that it's something that in this book I found it really just remarkable because it's got all these things figured out. And it talks about reproduction, the system, renal circulation, the system, elimination, the system, elimination, digestion, the systems. And it's got great diagrams of all the many hundreds and thousands of unique and distinct parts that are usual in any of these human beings. And it varies a lot in human beings. There are people generally that have the heart on the left side of their chest. There are some people who are entire mirror images of that. The fundamental asymmetry of people is that nobody is totally symmetrical unless they grow a second heart. You know, I mean, these are the kinds of things to figure out. Bronchioles, the respiratory system. So respiration is kind of the word I was looking for because it's all matters of respiration. And here's some of the sections that the idea is this is a coloring book. So what you do in a study, each one of these pages, you get out some colored pencils, and then you just kind of fill in each aspect of the legend, which has got the name. Like here, part of the lymphoid system. So we're talking about the endocrine system and the lymphoid system, and maybe they should be closer together in the pages because they're very closely related in their function. That these are the kinds of things. Yeah, the word I'm looking for is kind of like combustion, but it's not. And later I'm gonna remember it. I'm gonna be like, aha, that is a simple word that should have been right on the top of my thinking about it. The lymphoid system, the lymphatic system, the inferior vena cava, the umbilical cord, the caval and azygos systems of the cardiovascular systems. These are veins and arteries into the muscles and sclerata and the what was the word? The fascia, excuse me. By that I meant the fascia. I studied this in one point where I was thinking about, I was entertaining the idea of going pre-med. So this is I've had this book for a very long time. The mediastinum walls and coverings of the heart. The modern dogma of the heart has learned to find that it can regenerate. Muscles, neuromuscular junctions, bones. Systems of the body: respiratory, digestive, urinary, immune, lymphoid, reproductive system female, reproductive system male. Regions of the body. So that's what it's got. Systems body: skeletal, muscular, cardiovascular, lymphatic, nervous, endocrine, and integument. And respiration will do. Hey, have a great day. Metabolism is what I'm. Have a great day. Logos 2000.